How are we, ladies and gentlemen? Gridiron 360 settle. Back on the mics. Dave and Bill talking free agency in the NFL. We wrapped up our first segment talking the NFC East. We're going to stay on the NFC side and move towards the North. The NFC North. Didn't Madden used to call it the North?
The Norris.
The Norris?
Because that was the hockey division that was almost all the same teams.
Yes. So we're going to talk NFC North. We're going to start, I'll start with going through the teams and where they pick caps and so forth. Starting with the Detroit Lions, who have the number 3 pick in this year's draft. They currently sit at number 15 in salary cap space with $47 million. After that, the Chicago Bears.
They don't have a pick in the first round. They don't, because they traded for Khalil Mack last year. So their first pick is, they have 2 second-rounders, one coming back from Oakland in that deal, and then their own, which is, I believe their own is the earlier pick.
Okay, and they sit at number 25 in cap space with $16 million. You've got the Minnesota Vikings picking number 26 in the first round, who have the lowest amount of cap space. They are number 32 of 32 with only $1.3 million.
They're going to have some, obviously,
they're going to have to make some moves.
Casualties. They obviously also lose Everson Griffin in that too, which is a big piece of their defense.
No, that's Minnesota.
That's who you just said.
Oh, yeah. Sorry. I've got Detroit on my mind. Last, we have the Green Bay Packers picking at number 30. They currently sit as the 24th team in cap space with $20 million. Sound good?
Sounds
Let's
good.
start with Detroit. Again, they pick number 3. They have $47 million in cap space.
What don't they need?
They need about everything. The whole Matt Stafford thing, what's going to happen? So obviously that's probably at the forefront of their decision-making is what to do at quarterback. Running back, I mean, who knows what's going to happen.
Running back is probably not necessarily a need early on, but probably through free agency would make sense to bring in a good number 2 back to spell them. They got, when you're going to talk about some of the guys there they don't have. This is a team that put together after
who's
their
their
starter
lead back there right now?
the guy from Auburn.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. I can totally picture him. He was a second rounder.
It'll come to us in a second. Go ahead.
But anyway, they had guys like McKissick got time there. I'm trying to think who was the other back they had a kind of a throwaway.
Abdullah?
They've got guys going out, and they've got to determine, with the injuries at their running back. I want to say it's like Carry on Johnson.
That's who it is.
I knew it. It was on the tip of my tongue. Killing me. But anyway, he has been known to be an injury problem for them. Obviously, he'll be going in his 3rd year now, I believe. So that's potential. Certainly could always look at reshoring the O-line. I put here going for DN, but if we look at the guys that they are losing, or at least potential to lose, they got to do something at D tackle. Yep. Some big time D tackles in their rotation are all up for pay. And then certainly there's been a lot of talk about them in the secondary, and their draft pick in this could really determine either they're going to have to go all out in the secondary and free agency, and that would to me be the leading point if they don't go like an Okudah number 3. Because I don't even think, their solution in the secondary, even if they decide to play him in that star or heavy safety, taking Isaiah Simmons, to me still just with what this team needs doesn't make sense for them. Even though that kid's an otherworld talent, I think they're so depleted. Team that, they got to decide what they're going to do with Darius Slay.
Yep.
So that's a big play, but he was already getting talks about being on the way out, so that might be where they try to trim some salary too as well. And they're not particularly strong outside of him anyway. So
right.
They really need it all. So I think, why don't you go through some of their free agents and kind of start there, and then we'll talk about, I think the first domino is the QB, and we'll get to that in a minute.
Right. So we don't know what's going to happen with the QB, but on the free agency block for the Lions, I'm going to start on defense, and you mentioned it. They need a lot of D tackles. So the reason being is my boy Damon Snacks Harrison is a free agent, as well as other D tackle Mike Daniels, as well as other D tackle Ashawn Robinson, who was a Alabama draft pick just 2 years ago or 3 years ago or so. He's only 25.
I got to believe he's a re-sign given how many, just because of his youth. But that's but he's going to command more money.
Yep, and Snacks, 31 years old, still getting it done. I love Snacks Harrison. He is he's not necessarily a sack type D tackle, but he is able to stuff a run with the best
and he's
of
a
them in the league.
disruptor, very big disruptor.
He is. I mean, we had him for the stint in New York, and I really, really saw some great stuff out of Snacks Harrison. So he is older, but I mean, you got to shore up that D line when you got three of these guys on the free agency market. So I anticipate, that's got to be a focus for him.
Yep.
Outside of that, you got Tavon Wilson at safety. You've got Miles Killebrew at safety. I forgot to mention another D tackle, Darius Kilgo. You've got Michael Ford and D Virgin, both cornerbacks that are free agents. Other than that, on the defensive side of the ball, you've got D and Jamie Metter. Okay. Outside of that, flipping over to the offense, Graham Glasgow, their guard, is real good.
Yep.
He's a free agent. You've also got J.D. McKissick. You mentioned him as one of their running backs. Tight end Logan Thomas. This is a guy that was a quarterback in college that I think that I certainly, if them transitioning tight end, I feel like them doing something like that, they felt they had something, and his name wasn't called a whole lot. Keep in mind, they also drafted the kid from Iowa.
Yeah. Yep.
So this past year, a tight end, and I expect he'll get a little bit better. Ode Abushi, offensive tackle, also a free agent. And outside of that, you've got Jeff Driscoll, backup quarterback, and long snapper punter. So that's kind of the gist of it. Jermaine Kearse, wide receiver, is also out there on the free agency market. Not one of the higher names, but a guy that's been kind of a consummate third wide receiver on teams throughout his career. And, sometimes he'll show flashes, but nothing that you need two solid 1 and 2s before, you even worry about that.
I think they could look at a lot of re-signing, though. Something to notice, or at least that I notice, is with the exception of their top 4 guys, everybody's under $2.5 million that's available. So the re-signs, again, because you're kind of looking at, all right, who's an up-and-comer that's going to take a big dollar chunk out of them. There's not really a lot of guys. I mean, the guys are going to get raises, some of them, but I do think they have the ability to fill out their roster by bringing some of these lower level, like you mentioned, like a Logan Thomas. Like, that guy's clearly a project. He's not even $1 million cap hit. Don't see him getting much more, but do you bring him in to, have that third receiver or third tight end just to, help fill out your room? That's kind of stuff like that. I think their big thing, like you mentioned, I think Robinson is probably the most in for, just again because of his pedigree and his youth, for the bump. I would imagine they could re-sign Harrison for less. I mean, his cap hit is about $11 million. But the question is, how much lower can they get him? Because he is 31. Mike Daniels might be a walk candidate at this point, who's at $8 million. I don't know how much he's really going to command in the free agent market. And then you go right to their strong safety, and it's already down to 3.5. So again, I think they have some room to re-sign, but the problem is they're the third worst team in the NFL. So how much of this do you want to re-sign?
Well, I mean, in Glasgow, I think is a good guard, and he's young, 28. He doesn't command. He'll command more money.
I'd agree. Yeah, he would be one of those increase guys.
He's going to be an increase, but it might not be too high, and that's a guy that I think they really need to focus on, regardless if they have Stafford or somebody else back there. You got to make sure you have some protection, and outside of him and Ibushi, the rest of the offensive line is still intact. So, where do you think they could go outside of resigning these guys? If you're looking at free agents that might make sense for them.
Yeah, well, here's kind of my thing is, first let's just touch on the Matthew Stafford. Like, I'm going to tell you, the NFL generates more smoke, in particular at the quarterback position, than they do generate fire. I believe, even though this is probably the most wide open from a structural standpoint that a quarterback position has been in since free agency that I can remember, where there's so many names out there. But again, you really only have probably one or two guys that are considered potential ascending quarterbacks. Much the rest are can I retread guys? Can we get something out of a failed prospect? So I don't see Stafford going anywhere. I think that's I think it's a little bit of smoke. Could it happen? Yeah. I mean, but the other simple fact is Stafford is getting older. So, and he can be more prone to injury now. He was never known as terribly mobile. He wasn't a statue, but when the wheels slow down a little bit on a quarterback, it's already not fast. Again, you're back to injuries. They haven't been able, like everybody had thought, to really, when they brought in Patricia, that they were going to try to figure out a more of a defensive running game style. It hasn't happened, and Kerryon Johnson has not shown that he's capable of handling that load at this point. Still young, but jury is definitely still out. If I'm looking at Detroit, I think one area where they are fairly solid, they got a pretty good hit last year, is at the receiver position. Galladay kind of came out of nowhere 2 years ago. Has definitely established himself as a number one. I think he's a legit number one.
Yep.
I'm going to get the two Marvins confused, but the Marvin Hall had some pretty big games for them. He was actually, I think he was brought in by the Bears, I remember, in free agency, and they just had a pretty heavy locker room for receivers, and he ended up having a really good year for them. And then they got the other Marvin, I always got him confused. Anyway, I think they've got
Jones, Johnson.
And then they got T.J. Hawkinson.
Yeah, that's the tight end.
The tight end. Now, he, unfortunately, what is he, number 10, I think he was picked. He was definitely in the top 15. Had a couple of early games where he looked good and then
fell off the map.
Not really. Now, granted, they had some injuries. You saw a lot, as you mentioned. The backup Driscoll is a free agent. I think at this point they have to go the route we talked about with Philadelphia and get a capable backup with the idea of being a backup. Again, I'm going under the premise that Stafford's not going anywhere. If it happens, I mean, again, we could have chaos. Like, quarterback position could get crazy this year. I just don't see it because I don't see enough guys out there that teams are willing to hedge their future on. There's no Kirk Cousins. And I'm not saying Kirk Cousins was great, but when he was the open free agent, everybody was like, okay, who's going to spend money on him, or who is going to trade for Garoppolo? I mean, you got Bridgewater. That's pretty much, in my mind, everyone else is a retread or an aging vet. And so, why would Detroit go aging vet route?
I don't think they will. And if what you say is true, and it's smoke, and that Stafford's back, then if that's the case, you've got to put the pieces around him. You're then focusing on O-line, receiver, and running back. Particularly, I would think you try to grab your running back in the draft and build more on the O-line and free agency. Maybe a receiver in free agency, but you could also do that. We've mentioned both those, running back and wide receiver. There's a lot of them in this year's draft, but based on what a lot of the pundits are saying, it seems like the focus for them in free agency needs to be on the defensive side of the ball.
I'd agree. I would.
I agree too. But if they keep Stafford, then they have to flip that focus, man.
Well, their O-line is not horrific in reality. I don't think it's terrible. The outsides aren't as good. I think they're actually fairly strong, in the middle. I think the issue is going to be with that. Again, I'm assuming they re-sign Glasgow, which I think they'd be crazy not to. But here's the talk then. If they do go secondary, or excuse me, do you go defense, do you go secondary? Because here's what I wouldn't do. I'm not going to go out there and spend the biggest dollars I'm going to spend on a corner and then go draft Akuda. I'm just not going to do that.
Right.
Because then I'm going to have guys, and the only thing I can hope for is that Akuda and whoever, insert guy here, whether that's a Chris Harris or anybody for that matter, can they cover for 10 seconds? I think they have to go. I think they have to get aggressive in defense. Their linebacking core is okay, can tackle, but I would say I would have to go and you got to get pressure. You got to get pressure.
I don't think they weren't the worst defense in the league by any means. There were some games there they really had some good games. But again, here we go with the domino effect. I mean, if they were to go heavy on that corner, then that number 3 pick, you're right, I wouldn't go Okudah. In fact, I would drop back. I'd trade that shit back. And
it's hard to do, but
it's hard. But
the
I'd
capital
work,
you got to give for that is hard.
I'd work to do it. I'd work to do the best I can to do it because they'd be better served than taking such a big name, still a rookie, Okudah, than maybe getting a couple picks and getting a couple guys for the secondary or the defense.
They would definitely be a trade back candidate because you got the Tua. Assuming. This is an assumption, but assuming Washington doesn't go after Tua, you've got like a Miami sitting back there at what, 5 or 4? 5.
Yeah,
you guys are 4.
We're 4.
You're 4,
so
5. They're at 5. So you're talking about, there's that feeling that that guy's going to be off the board.
The problem is they're not. I mean, like unless somebody else trades up in that spot, that's what would freak Miami because Miami knows that the Giants aren't going to take quarterback.
No, right. That's my point.
So it'd have to be, okay, there's another team out there that's looking to trade up to 3rd.
Yeah, and let's be honest. I mean, I would say, but that's assuming that Detroit doesn't want to play for the future. Just because Matthew Stafford may not be gone, again, you're not talking about a guy that's going to be playing at elite level in 3-4 years from now. So does the Tua make sense? Yeah, you're going to scream full rebuild. But I agree with you. They would be the best trade back candidate in that aspect because they have so many missing pieces.
They could they play games with the draft, so they could threaten Miami and say, "Hey, we're thinking about taking Tua now."
Yep.
And if you want to trade with us, so you can make sure you get him, that's fine. And then drop back, maybe earn a couple things, and at 5, take Herbert.
Yeah.
Maybe get a couple other picks along with it.
I think that's going to be kind of the interesting thing that's going to come out to me is how close teams feel especially after pro days. To me, are far bigger than the combine. Combines are workout warriors. Pro days, I think, is where you start to see GMs and start to kind of change their tune. It'll be how close people think that Herbert, maybe even a Jordan Love, because that name's gotten kind of popular, but I'm not there yet, but I know it's gotten popular, is how close those 2 guys are to a Tua. If they're closer, then you're not going to sell your draft capital to get up there because you're going to believe that one of them is going to fall to you. But if you really believe that it's Burrow, Tua, and then a big gap, then that puts Detroit in a little bit better position. I mean, Washington could be kind of viewed the same way, except Washington's got to find somebody that energizes that team.
Yeah,
they cannot pass and go take an O lineman and a
something
wide
not
receiver.
Sexy.
Yeah, they can't. They have to make a splash because I think if I was one of their fans, I would be livid with the way the division of that team is. Detroit, I think Detroit fans, if there's ever a fan base, maybe even more so than Cleveland, that is more apathetic to being losers all the time, it would be Detroit.
I'd agree with you. I'd agree with you.
So that's kind of my thought. I mean, I think I would go. They got names like the guy from Kansas City, Chris Jones. I knew it was a simple name, Chris Jones. But again, there's talk about tagging him. So
I mean, they could go. There is guys in the secondary that they said Detroit could easily target.
Could they go back and get Ndamukong Suh on a cheap deal with
Maybe.
the bring back home? I don't know how much he's burnt bridges there. But this is a team I think that really it's going to have to do something and
I mean, we started out, I think a lot of it depending on what the whole thing with Stafford is. I think when we find that out, that could tell us a lot more about what's going to happen for them.
Yeah, I mean, certainly everything I've said, all bets are off if all of a sudden Stafford, because then I would say they're bound for Tua. That's what they're doing, and they're trying. But I don't know. I be honest with you, I'm not familiar with the situation of can he be cut, one, without a lot of dead money, and number two, remember this is a team that played off of Jeff Driscoll. Like, what's your plan B? Are you going to start Tua? And then with the free agency
but you
money,
can't do that. You can't do that with his injury. There is no way you can throw him out there to the wall. And with his injury history,
Well, they say
like
he'll be healthy.
He will, but like, it's the same with Jordan Love. Like, this is a kid. Like, there's two guys in my mind right now who you may be able to start, and that's Burrow and Herbert. I think Tua. Yep. I think Jordan Love. The comparisons for Jordan Love are to who? Who are they comping him to?
I imagine
Mahomes.
and
Mahomes. And what happened with Mahomes? He sat for a year until he got in there. So you can't like those two guys, Tua with his injury and Jordan Love, I think just being so raw. Like, I don't think you can throw them out there to the wolves right away. I just don't. I think you would any team that takes
here's your problem
Tua.
Can you sell think about this. Kansas City brought in Alex Smith.
Can you sell your fan base?
Can you sell your fan base on I've got not only
You're talking about Detroit or Miami with Tua. Yes.
Right, but who are you gonna put in there that they are not gonna be like hammering you for? I mean, Alex Smith had an MVP year with Mahomes on the bench. An MVP year. Like, that kept the natives from getting restless, and he was a number 10 pick. We're talking about the number 3 pick, who, if you're a number 3 pick, you're expected to play and make a difference.
This is where we may differ in this conversation because
I'm not disagreeing with the smartness of what you're doing.
You said, Stafford, if they take, a lot will happen depending on what they do with Stafford. Yeah, a lot will happen, but they could re-sign, make sure Stafford's good, keep him there, and then, in my mind, still go at that would make even more sense to go for a guy like Tua at number 3, is if they have Stafford, because then he can sit for a year, get healthy. I really, really believe that whoever drafts Tua Tagovailoa is going to have him sit for a year.
Okay, I don't disagree with the logic on it. I don't necessarily think everybody uses logic with that. The other part is I don't think they can draft him and keep Stafford. One, you got a lot of money tied up in your quarterback room, but the most important thing is Matthew Stafford, a guy that's been to a few Pro Bowls in his career, is Matthew Stafford going to be okay with the guy right behind him and that 1-year concept? Because the truth is, he could come out and somebody's going to sign him for at least big money, probably more like 3 years. Somebody will go throw 30. Look, I mean, is he better than what, what's his name, Cousins was coming out with an attitude?
I think
and he got what, $88 million 3 years, fully guaranteed, or $84 million. So the point is, I'm just trying to figure out how that dynamic would work. I agree with you. It makes sense in my mind for everybody to sit. I already told you, if Cincinnati picks Joe Burrow, I don't want him seeing the field next year, only because I don't want to have to buy him a friggin' headstone. And that's what they're going to have to do after a year behind Cincinnati's horrible team. So, yeah, I agree with you in that sense. I definitely do. I'm just trying to figure out, unfortunately, you got to make everybody happy, and that's going to be a tough swing. So, I believe Stafford's there. If they don't, I don't know how you could draft Tua and how they're going to get away with not playing him. Because what are you going to do? Who are you going to bring in? You bring Case Keenum? The minute Case Keenum has one of his 4 interception games, the whole world will be coming down on them. Now, granted, there's only 10 people in Detroit, but they're angry. They want to kill somebody.
Maybe not. They might not be so angry. I think you said it at the start. That fan base is so complacent.
They're a little
they're all right. They get it.
Yeah.
They suck.
But this is what I will say, kind of going back to what you originally said, they would definitely be the best trade back team if they could do it. I think they fit the most with that mold, only because we mentioned they had so many issues. You've got the quarterback position could be figured out for 2 years at a minimum. Okay, so I don't know. I think that's kind of the shot. I think if you can load up, they could go in a number of directions.
Yeah. I mean, they are kind of a conundrum in this.
Yeah.
I mean, we've gone through a lot of these and felt pretty, strong, felt some type of way about a team. But this one is a bit of a conundrum because, like I said, a lot of the pundits are saying they've got, their target the majority of their targets should be defensive.
Yep.
But a lot of that is pending on what happens with their quarterback.
Yeah, if their quarterback stays, my feeling is they got to go defense first. What makes the most sense for them is if for any reason Chase Young falls, obviously he is a go-and-get-it guy. He fits perfectly for what they need. But if not, I would tell you Okudah makes more sense for them if they don't go corner. But I still think the two best defensive players are Simmons from
Chase.
Clemson and Chase Young. So, they again, I think Washington and
Chase
Detroit,
Young could fall to him. If
Right, that's what I'm saying. Washington goes to
Yeah, then it's all bets are off.
I got to be honest with you. Washington could draft, a long snapper because I told you I never know what that knucklehead's doing there. So it'll be interesting. Not a coach change here. Like this to me, I will say this about Detroit. I think this is Patricia's last year if he doesn't show some progression, because I think there's been a struggle to figure out exactly what he's brought to the table.
Yeah, I would agree. All right, so good. So that's the Detroit Lions, and we are going to stop right here, and then we'll jump back in and talk about your Chicago Bears.
All right.